This Sunday, we'll be speaking about generosity in the morning service. And so, all this week, the rest of this week, we will be talking about giving and generosity. Now, in my own daily devotions, I am working through the book of 2 Corinthians, and frankly, I've gotten to the point where it's just a little bit tedious. Tedious, not so much because of the content. Passages like 2 Corinthians chapter 5 that tells of the renovation of believers as they come to Christ. Those are just wonderful passages. But tedious because Paul, starting in chapter 8, hits a theme that he carries through the end of the book, and it's the theme of giving. It's the theme of generosity. Paul says two things about their generosity. First of all, in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, starting in verse 7, Paul says, "Was I wrong when I humbled myself and honored you by preaching God's good news to you without expecting anything in return? I robbed other churches by accepting their contributions so I could serve you at no cost. When I was with you, I didn't have enough to live on. But I didn't become a financial burden to anyone. The brothers who came from Macedonia brought me all that I needed. I've never been a burden to you, and I never will be." What Paul is saying here is that as Paul worked in the Corinthian church, there were some who wanted to support him, and Paul refused. Now that's interesting. It goes against what we would think would be the norm for Christian workers. They're working their performances, they're performing a service for the people that they minister to. Of course they would accept contributions, but Paul didn't. The reason he didn't was because of the Roman system of patronage. You see, it wasn't the church in general that was trying to give it to Paul. There were certain individuals in the church, wealthy individuals, who were trying to give to Paul under the Roman system of patronage. That would have made Paul under obligation to those individuals. Paul didn't want to be under obligation to anyone. And so when they said, "Here, Paul, come and live with us," or "Here, Paul, accept this money," he said, no. Here they were being generous, and yet Paul said no. But understand, he said no because their generosity had strings tied to it. Now, amazingly, in the same passage in which Paul talks about how he refused their generosity, he requests their generosity. All the way back in 1 Corinthians, the very end of the book, 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 1. "Now regarding your question about the money being collected for God's people in Jerusalem, you should follow the same procedure I gave to the churches in Galatia. On the first day of each week, you should each put aside a portion of the money you have earned. Don't wait till I get there and then try to collect it all at once." Paul says, plan for your generosity. In that plan, take the first day of the week and set money aside so that when I come, you can simply give what you've already collected. He picks up that procedure in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 12. He says that when he comes back to the Corinthian church, he intends to collect the offering from them. Chapter 9, verse 12, "Two good things will result from this ministry of giving. The needs of the believers in Jerusalem will be met, and they will joyfully express their thanks to God." As a result of your ministry, they will give glory to God for your generosity to them, and to all believers will prove that you are obedient to the good news of Christ. Paul refuses the generosity of the Corinthian church when he is the recipient, but he challenged them to give generously for those in need in Jerusalem. Jerusalem at this point was preparing for a famine that was prophesied by the prophet Agabus. Paul says, direct your generosity to them. There can be no strings there. They don't even know those who are in Jerusalem. Generosity is giving without strings. Generosity is giving when I expect nothing in return but God's blessing. Be generous today.